A graceful morning to all the participants from St. Aloysius Institute of Education, Mangalore. St. Aloysius Institute of Education is a leading institute of teacher education belonging to the prestigious group of Jesuit institutions in Mangalore, catering to the educational needs of student teachers by training them to be competent and resourceful teachers. This institute believes in inculcating the spirit of secularism, compassion, equal opportunities, individual freedom, and gender equality. Today, our college organizes its second national webinar on the topic Gender and Sexuality, History of LGBT in India to know the multifaceted issues that concern men, women, and transgender. Dr. Lily David, the resource person, will enlighten us more on the topic. As we begin the session, I request Dr. Farita Vegas, Principal, St. Aloysius Institute of Education, to welcome the virtual audience.
A very good morning to one and all. We are very happy to conduct this webinar on this topic, which is sometimes very controversial. And this webinar will be an educative process for all of us. On this occasion, I deem it my pleasure to welcome Dr. Lily David, former principal, St. Joseph's College of Commerce, Autonomous, Bangalore, to this webinar as the resource person. I know Dr. Lily David personally, and I know that she's a very humane and a concerned person about the difficulties her students used to undergo. And she is a lifelong learner who has kept on learning and is spending her time doing counseling. So I know that she is a busy person, and I'm really privileged that she is here with us. Dr. Lily, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
I also welcome all the participants who are here today with us, keen to learn more about the LGBT community. For us as a teacher education college, it is very important to educate our student teachers with the spectrum of sexuality that is there, that we discuss openly today. We are looking forward to inclusive classrooms where everybody is welcome and everyone's problems, diversity should be, very a part of our teaching profession. On this occasion, I also welcome my faculty, especially Mr. Jerome D'Souza, the convener of this program. For all the, I thank him for all the effort he has put into making this webinar a reality. I wish all the participants all the best, and we have a question and answer session after Dr. Lily David's presentation. I invite you all to ask any queries that you would have had, because this is a topic where we have to educate ourselves so that we treat another with respect and equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, and an affectionate welcome to you too. Speeches do major things. They provide food for mind and create light for better understanding. We have Dr. Lily David, former principal, St. Joseph College of Commerce, Bangalore, as a speaker to address the topic. I invite Mr. Santosh Putado, faculty, to introduce the speaker.
Good morning to you all. I take pleasure to introduce the speaker of this national webinar, Dr. Lillian David. She considers teaching as her vocation, and she regularly conducts workshops on teachers' laboratory, effective classroom teaching, as well as on self-awareness, proactive behavior, and leadership skills for teachers of various educational institutions. We are privileged to have her as our speaker today. Dr. Lillian David hails from Mumbai and she completed all her education there. She started her teaching career at her alma mater, the at the Nursi Monji College of Commerce and Economics, Mumbai in 1980. She was awarded a doctorate in marketing in 1985 by the Bombay University. She has taught in various reputed colleges in Mumbai, Mangalore, and Bangalore. She has been a collaborator of Jesuit education for more than 2.5 decades, the most part being in at St. Joseph's College of Commerce, Autonomous, Bangalore. She had also discharged her duties as the principal of the same college. As an academician, she was the chairperson and member of many bodies like the Board of Studies, Academic Council, and member of and also peer team member of UGC and NAC assessment boards. She has been a research guide for both doctoral as well as MPhil studies. Currently, she is following her passion in the field of counseling and is pursuing a master's degree in psychological counseling from Sampurna, Manfred College, Bangalore. Today, we are fortunate to listen to her talk on the topic Gender and Sexuality, History of LGBT in India. Once again, a warm welcome to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Santosh. The LGBT community is a diverse, underserved, and often stigmatized group that faces many barriers to access equality. Parents and caregivers must help to shape a child's healthy understanding of both their own gender and their gender diversity out in the world. The session calls participants to explore their ideas and feelings about the LGBT community and the values that are transmitted explicitly or implicitly. The session introduces cultural and biological issues related to gender identity and gender expression. Now I invite Dr. Lily David to begin the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Uh, Good morning to all of you, to my audience. Thank you for the introduction and the invitation to address mainly the students of St. Aloysius B.Ed College in Mangalore and also all those others who have joined in. This is a subject of general and personal interest, and I must say that I do not claim to be an expertise. It is not my field of expertise, but out of a genuine desire, I have tried to find out more facts about this topic. I will not be able to cover all the concepts and all the groups, but this is an attempt to bring greater awareness to the society regarding the often much maligned LGBTQ plus community. In many countries, homosexuality is illegal and its punishment may extend to the death penalty. Hardliners in most religions have little or no tolerance towards the LGBTQ plus community. Those who identify themselves as other genders or have homosexual orientation are often deemed to have psychiatric problems. Psychological or spiritual counseling to straighten them out are advocated. As much as academic communities would like to consider themselves enlightened and tolerant, mention of the LGBTQIA community are made in hushed tones, and even academicians are reluctant to address this issue. I will share my PPT now, which you can pin to your screen. So you can see on the top left corner what the words LGBTQIA stands for. And you will also see the picture of two flags. Going back a little into the history of the flags, in 1978, the artist Gilbert Baker was asked to create a symbol of pride for the gay community. Baker decided to make the flag as a symbol of pride since it brings visibility and because the flag is a powerful symbol of pride. He was inspired by the rainbow, and as you can see, each color has its own meaning, starting with hot pink, red, orange, yellow, green for serenity with nature, turquoise for the magic of art, indigo, and violet. In the years since, the flag has been reduced to 6 colors. The flag no longer uses hot pink, and the turquoise and the indigo have been replaced with royal blue. Being an ally means you are willing to act with and for others in pursuit of ending oppression and creating equality. In this context, it means that even though a person does not belong to the LGBTQ plus community, they would support their cause. Now, here is a question that most people would like to get an answer for. Gay rights activists and psychiatrists in India report that an increasing number of parents approach psychiatrists to cure their children of homosexuality. Conversion therapy involves adverse conditioning, including electric shock, nausea-inducing drugs. But however, these cures for people with non-heterosexual sexual orientations do not have medical justification. They represent a serious threat to the health and mental well-being of affected people. The American Psychiatric Association and the American Psychological Association have suggested for many years that homosexuality is a normal variant of human sexual orientation as opposed to a mental disorder or a pathological condition. Now, this is going to be our mascot as we discuss the topic. The genderbread person, similar to the gingerbread cookies that we make at Christmas time. So we start with gender identity. Gender identity is how you think about yourself with regard to your gender. Do you identify yourself as male or female or a mixture of both? A transgender person is usually born with a body and genes that match typical male or female, but they know that their gender identity to be different. Gender queer is anyone who identifies to a non-binary gender or sexual orientation. They can be gay, lesbian, transgender, transsexual, bisexual, asexual, pansexual, intersex, etc. We will be touching on some of these terms in the slides ahead. The term cisgender refers to people who have the same gender which was assigned at birth. So in my case, I was assigned the female gender at birth and I am a woman. It hasn't changed. I would like to tell you, bring to your attention the stories of two brave transgender people who conquered many odds and the condemnation of their own family to achieve their dreams. Transgender refers to a person whose gender identity is different from the sex stated in their birth certificate. For many, this can mean going through gender reassignment through hormones or surgery. Most often, they are disowned by their biological parents. On the right-hand side, you will see the transgender flag, where the blue stands for trans men, pink for trans women, and white for intersex and non-binary genders. This is the story of Adam Harry, a 20-year-old native of Kerala and India's first transgender pilot. He completed a private pilot course in Johannesburg. But when the news about the first transgender to become a pilot circulated on social media, he was disowned by family and friends. After returning, Adam worked at several places. He spent his nights at railway stations and bus stands. When the news of his hardship reached some of his transgender friends, they advised him to seek the aid of the Ministry of Social Welfare, Government of Kerala. Eventually, the government decided to bear the expenses to enroll him as a trainee pilot in the Rajiv Gandhi Academy for Aviation Technology. The second example that I would like to highlight is about Heidi Sadia, a 23-year-old who works with a Malayalam TV news channel. She lost her biological family when she left home at 16 after coming out to them and revealing that she was a transgender or that she did not feel comfortable in the male body that she was born with. After being abandoned by her biological parents, a trans woman fostered Heidi. She supported Heidi's education. Heidi trained to be a journalist and works for a Malayalam television news channel. The world media hailed her as India's first transgender television journalist. She decided to reactivate her YouTube channel and she started blogging about life as a transgender in Kerala. Today, her YouTube channel has over 1 lakh subscribers. She got married to Adhar, a trans man. He also has foster parents who are transgender. Heidi lost her biological family when she ran away from home at the age of 16 after coming out to them. However, what she has gained since is a family that accepts her, a job she loves, a dedicated online following, and a husband to share her life with. In the next slide, we will see a short video clip about 10 iconic transgender achievers who scripted history.
For trans women, it's like we are told in the hands of patriarchy, you're molested, you're insulted, courts even say that it is impossible that you are being molested. Ram, still it is the same old story. Still people call you Chakka, Mamu, Gold, Hijra. Hijra is a respected word, but it's turned into a complete bad word. You know, and there is so much of violence. In my community, there are thousands of Nirbhaya. Thousands of Nirbhaya, which you can't even imagine the amount of way how they are being raped and killed, and they are not even considered as human beings.
Yes, going back to my PPT. I hope that was inspirational to see how these people have risen above the fetters that society usually puts on them, and they were able to achieve their dreams. So this is our mascot, the genderbread person. We have finished with gender identity, and now we go on to gender expression. So gender expression is how you demonstrate your gender is how you demonstrate your gender through ways in which you act, dress, behave, and interact. So there would be feminine or masculine ways in which a person expresses themselves, or a mixture of both, which is termed as androgynous. In this slide, you can see different expressions of gender. The people draped in saris could be men or women or transgender or intersex individuals who want to express themselves in a feminine manner. While the young person at the top right uh, dresses in a manner that is both masculine and womanly. The term androgyny is a combination of masculine and feminine characteristics in an ambiguous form. Androgyny may be with regard to biological sex, that is a mixture of both sexes, commonly termed as intersex, or gender identity, or gender expression. As you can see in this photo, it is a mixture of both masculine and feminine way of expressing themselves. So we are back to our mascot, and we go on to the third part of it to explain biological sex. Biological sex refers to objectively measurable sex organs hormones, and chromosomes. Therefore, for a female, it would mean that she has a vagina, a uterus, ovaries, all the sex organs for a female, XX chromosomes. Whereas for a male, it would mean having a penis, testes, and XY chromosomes. We will come to intersex. I will explain it a little more in detail with the help of an example. This is a mixture of having the reproductive or sexual anatomy or chromosomes or hormones of both the sexes. Over here, you will see that there are 5 markers which determine the sex of a person, the biological sex of a person. They are 1, the genes or the chromosomes. If you will see the first one, XX and XY. The DNA contains the genes or the chromosomes. Y is normally the sex determining chromosome. Since it is the presence or the absence of Y that typically determines the male or the female sex of the offspring. In the above image, the pointer ball, this white ball, is more towards the right, that is towards the male side of it. The second is the gonad, the sex gland or reproductive gland. In the female, it is the reproductive cells are the egg cells, whereas in the male, the reproductive cells are the sperms. So again, the white pointer ball is towards the right. The third one is the internal reproductive anatomy. And so in the case of a female, you will find that the uterus is present, whereas there is no uterus present in the case of a male. Here again, the pointer ball is more towards the male side. Now coming to the fourth one, the hormones or the sex steroids. Here the ball has shifted, and the 2 main classes of sex steroids are androgens and estrogens. In general, androgens are considered male sex hormones since they have masculine effects, while estrogens and progestins are considered female sex hormones, although all types are present in each sex at different levels. The white ball pointer is more towards the female side. And then you have the external genitalia, and in this case, the genitalia resembles the female. When all the 5 sex markers are distinctly male or female, biological sex is determined to be either male or female. However, at birth, it is only the genitalia that is taken as the sole identification of biological sex. Okay, to understand this concept, where a person can be born with some of the sex markers, biological sex markers as male and some of the biological sex markers as female, we will see 4 minutes of another video.
I'm going to go to America or Australia, just get away.
Many parents would feel the same shock and fear, because sexual ambiguity just doesn't fit with our clear-cut view of male and female.
Some little girls who are born actually have male genes and are producing male hormones, but they look like little girls, and some babies who are born look like little boys, but in reality they have female genes and female internal structures.
We've been fed by a tale of 2 sexes, I think, from generation to generation, so that we think about maleness and femaleness as total separate packages that don't meet in the middle, when there is in fact huge overlap in terms of abilities, of anatomies, and of sexualities.
There are about 24 different conditions that blur the line between male and female. They're known as disorders of sexual development, or DSDs.
DSD is a broad range, looking at a spectrum from girls who may appear much more masculine initially to boys who are under-masculinized. And so it is really anywhere along that spectrum from femaleness to maleness.
Many of the conditions are relatively rare, but some, especially the milder differences, are surprisingly common. In a city like London or New York, as many as 100,000 people will have a DSD of some sort. Altogether, DSDs occur as frequently as twins or red hair. Some DSDs will also affect your general health. Janet has a DSD called congenital adrenal hyperplasia, or CAH. It means her adrenal glands don't work properly.
It's very threatening to a body, particularly if there are infections or some sort of other trauma that happens. You count on your body to react with extra cortisol, and people with adrenal hyperplasia, that's not the way the bodies work. Rather than fighting infections, it ends up collapsing from it. I don't really think that as a child you think about death, but I didn't know how close maybe I was sometimes.
While Janet's body can't make enough cortisol, it makes too much testosterone. And that led to ambiguous genitals.
They just couldn't determine the gender of my parents' baby in the way.
Yeah, that was just a short clip to show you how that it is medically possible to have some markers from the male and some from the female. So here is our mascot again, and we come to the last part of it, that is to explain sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is an enduring pattern of profound emotional affection and sexual attraction, as well as intimate and sexual relations with persons of the opposite sex and or opposite sex or the same sex or gender, or to both sexes or to more than one gender. These attractions are generally subsumed under the heterosexuality, homosexuality, and bisexuality title. No conclusive evidence supports any one specific cause of homosexuality. However, most researchers agree that it is a complex interplay of biological factors such as genes and hormones, as well as social factors like the environment that influence the development of sexual orientation. Asexuality is the lack of sexual attraction to others, or low or absent interest in or desire for sexual activity. Some asexual people are happier on their own, while some may want to form intimate romantic relationships. Just because someone doesn't want to have sex, they can still want to and enjoy companionship, closeness, fun, trust, and all the other elements that a close partnership can bring to one's life. So this brings me to the end of the first part of our presentation on sexuality and gender. I'm now moving on to give you a brief idea of the LGBTQ plus movement in India. In order to give context to this, I will be tracing the LGBT practice in India right from 1500 BC in its earliest references in Hindu scriptures, to its practice in Mughal times, to its criminalization during the British Raj, and then the voices of the Indian writers before independence, and finally the build-up of the momentum of the movement till the historic judgment was announced by the Supreme Court on the 6th of September 2018, where homosexuality was decriminalized. So up until this point, homosexual individuals were considered to be criminals and could serve a jail sentence. I will also briefly speak about the challenges that this community continues to face even today. So the first section is about LGBT references in ancient India. All of us have heard of the Kama Sutra, and there is a complete chapter on erotic homosexual behavior with explicit detailed instructions on how to perform homosexual acts, which is mentioned in the Indian text Kama Sutra written by Vatsayana. It also speaks of similar activities among transgenders who are known as Tritiya Prakritis. Women often married women and raised children together, and they were readily accepted by ordinary society. Tamil Sangam literature refers to the relationship between two men and explores the lives of trans women in Kuvangam village in Tamil Nadu. Thus, it is evident that India had a more open attitude to homosexuality before the British Raj, and there is ample evidence of it in mythology and medieval history. The Khajuraho temple complex in Madhya Pradesh was built by the Chandela dynasty between 950 and 1050 AD. The sculptures in this temple are known for their overt homosexual imagery. There are depictions of all female orgies erotically embracing each other and men displaying their genitals to each other. This is an acknowledgement that people engaged in homosexual acts. In conclusion to this section, I would like to say that an overview of temple imagery, sacred narratives, and religious scripture does prove that homosexual activities did exist in ancient India. Indian society recognized homosexuality in that period and even accepted it. Thus, criminalization of homosexuality is entirely a foreign concept. Now we move on to the second section of LGBT practices in Mughal India. Alauddin Khalji ruled the Delhi Sultanate between 1296 and 1316. His son Mubarak was known to be in love with Kushru, one of the noblemen in his court. Babur, who founded the Mughal dynasty, also wrote about his love for men. In his autobiography, he describes his infatuation and recollection of his erotic love for the teenage boy Baburi. The noble class of the Mughals engaged in both homosexuality and pederasty. Pederasty is a sexual relationship between an adult man and a pubescent or adolescent boy. The practice of pederasty was considered as pure love and prevalent among those from Central Asia. This is another example that has been documented of a Sufi poet being in love with a Brahmin boy. In conclusion, I would say that during the Mughal period, LGBTQ people were not ostracized, and society was tolerant towards them, and nobody was hounded for being a homosexual. The third section deals with a change in attitude towards homosexuality during the British Raj. This is the picture of King Henry VIII, who ruled England between 1511 and 1547 for 36 years. Both Judaism and Christianity outlawed sexual intercourse by same-sex couples. When Henry VIII, King of England, broke off with Roman Catholic Church, he passed a legislation in his reign called the Buggery Act of 1533. It prohibited the detestable and abominable offense of buggery committed with mankind or beast. Buggery or sodomy remained a capital offense in the entire British Empire until 1861. In this picture, you can see the infamous wheel of torture and death by hanging awarded to those who were guilty of homosexual practices. In India also, the criminalization of homosexuality under Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code came into force in 1861. In 1871, the Hijra community was labeled as a criminal tribe under the Criminal Tribes Act. It meant that they could be arrested as criminals anywhere in British India. The British determined that certain ethnic communities were prone to criminal activities. Therefore, their movements were restricted and their adult males had to report to the police every week. Most of these communities were semi-nomadic, petty traders, small farmers, Dalits, and Adivasis, who did not exactly conform to the British idea of being civilized. At the time of independence in 1947, there were 13 million people in 127 such communities. Under the Criminal Tribes Act, criminal eunuchs, they were considered as criminal even without anything being proved to them, just for the fact that they were eunuchs. These criminal eunuchs who dressed or ornamented like a woman in a public street were to be arrested without warrant and imprisoned. Thus, the presence of the British in India for almost 2 centuries had a powerful influence on the Indian society. These were the effect of mainly Victorian values rooted in Christian ideas of sin. These values were neither universal or timeless and were grossly insensitive to how sexual activity was perceived in other cultures. The founding fathers of our nation, trained in British schools and colleges, seemed to agree with the British worldview. It was difficult for them to accept that homosexuality was an accepted practice from ancient times despite evidence. After independence, the right to equality was implemented under Article 14. However, homosexuality continued to remain a criminal offense after its introduction in 1861 in the Indian Penal Code right up till 2018. The fourth section deals with Indian writers and poets who voiced their opinions on homosexuality during the pre-independence period. Chocolate was a short story in Hindi written by the nationalist and social reformer Pandey Bechan Sharma under the pen name Ugra. It was published in the nationalist paper Matwala. Ugra's crusade against male-to-male sex sparked a debate in Hindi newspapers and magazines, resulting in perhaps the first public debate in Hindi on homosexuality. There were voices of dissent too. Mahatma Gandhi spoke out against same-sex relations in a Young India letter. Young India was a weekly paper in English published by Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi from 1919 to 1931. He used Young India to spread his unique ideology and thoughts regarding the use of non-violence in organizing movements and to plan for India's eventual independence from Britain. In 1942, Ismat Chughai's a short story Lihaf, which means the quilt, was published. She wrote unabashedly about female desires and wants. Ismat began writing at a time when South Asian women were still sequestered and their voices suppressed. It was the emergence of feminist consciousness among Muslim women. Kamala Das was an Indian English poet as well as a leading Malayalam author in Kerala. Her first published semi-fictionalized autobiography, My Story, created a minor scandal. The autobiography revealed her extramarital heterosexual affairs and her adolescent crush on a female teacher and a brief lesbian encounter with an older student. All of us have heard about Shakuntala Devi, known as the human computer, and she was the author of the first published study of homosexuality in India called The World of Homosexuals. At this time, the idea was still quite taboo, but her interest in the topic was because of her marriage to a homosexual man. Realizing that she had married a gay man kindled her interest to study the plight of the gay community in India. She tried to bring the struggles of the LGBTQ community to the notice of the mainstream. In the mid-1960s, Shakuntala returned home after displaying her mathematical skills to professors and researchers in London. And after that, she married Paritosh Banerjee, an IAS officer from Kolkata. All seemed well until Banerjee's sexual preferences came to light. One would presume that the realization that she was married to a gay man would have turned her world upside down. In probability, it was a deep shock, but it probably was a deep shock. But Shakuntala rose above it and made a genuine effort to study the plight of the gay community in India. While still married to Banerjee, she started speaking to same-sex couples who were still in the closet, living abroad and in India. She also began documenting their experiences, their expectations from society, and subdued manner in which they had to live. Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code was scrapped only in 2018, but Shakuntala had called for its decriminalization in 1977. The fifth section deals with the increasing crescendo of voices between 1980 and 1989. An All India Hijra conference in Agra was held in 1981, which brought together over 50,000 Hijras from across South Asia. The Hijra community finally got voting rights in 1994. The All India Hijra Kalyan Sabha fought for this cause for over a decade. Meanwhile, in the 1980s, incidences from all over the country of ostracism of homosexual practices started making its way into the news. These are just a few examples. The first one, Jyotsna and Jayashri, after forced marriages to men, jumped in front of a train together. The second one, two college students, Malika and Latambika, both aged 20, who were in love, tied themselves together and leaped into a channel, but they were saved against their will. Leela Namdev and Urmila Shrestha fell in love. Leela is a widow and Urmila, as an adult, rejected the man to whom her marriage had been arranged at the age of 3. Both of them had jobs in the Bhopal police force. A Hindu priest performed their marriage ceremony, but they got fired from their police job when their homosexual orientation came to light. Aruna Gokil and Sudha Ratanwadia, 29, both of them 29, were teachers in a village school. They executed a Maitri Karar, which means friendship agreement, before a notary public after living together for 9 years. Geeta Darji and Kishori Shah were 24-year-old nurses and they faced the prospect of separation because of Geeta's husband. They took the decision to hang themselves rather than be separated. The AIDS ABVA, which stands for AIDS Bhedbhav Virodhi Andolan, was established in Delhi in 1988. This organization, played a crucial role in trying to bring about justice to the LGBTQ community. Translated into English, it means AIDS Anti-Discrimination Movement. It was the first HIV or AIDS activist movement in India. ABVA's most significant effort was its success in stalling the AIDS Prevention Bill, which was tabled secretly in the Rajya Sabha in 1989. On the surface, it looked as though it was for people having the AIDS condition, but it only resulted in giving medical professionals and the government authorities unprecedented power while violating the human rights of the citizens. And for this reason, it was stalled in the parliament by the ABVA. The sixth section of my presentation focuses on the events in the 90s that gave momentum to the LGBT movement in India. Bombay Dost was the first registered magazine for the LGBTQ plus community. AIDS Bhedbhav Virodhi Andolan publishes Less Than Gay, a 70-page report on homosexuality in India. From what you can read on the screen, you can see that clubs and organizations exclusively for the LGBTQ community are established in major cities in India. The community are being seen more openly. Now, there was a controversy in 1994 in Tihar jail when Kiran Bedi was the was the Inspector General of Prisons at that time. Reports were coming in that there was high incidence of sodomy, and therefore a medical team landed up at Tihar jail. The ABVA activists wanted to distribute condoms to the prisoners, but Kiran Bedi refused permission. Bedi argued that it would amount to a tacit admission that homosexuality was prevalent in Tihar jail. She was also of the opinion that the availability of condoms would encourage the practice. So you can see here that there is so much of social stigma attached to homosexuality that people would much rather forego safe sex practices than admit that it was prevalent. In response, the ABVA files a writ petition in the Delhi High Court demanding that free condoms be provided and that Section 377 be recognized as unconstitutional. The petition was dismissed in 2001. I'm only touching on some major points attached to the LGBTQ movement in India. And you can see as the years progress that more and more organizations are coming up, are being established in order to give a united voice to fight for their rights and also to make provisions for them, which the mainstream society does not. As in this case, the specific two more groups, the specific group is formed to meet the housing needs of the LGBTQ community. This is because very often when landlords find out that the house is being occupied by somebody who has an LGBTQ plus orientation, they are thrown out of the premises or they are shamed by their neighbors and landlords. 2nd July 1999 was the first time that a Rainbow Pride Walk was organized in Kolkata, the first one that first of its kind in India and South Asia. Thereafter, these walks are being organized in various cities in India. As you can see, people belonging to the community and even their allies who support them don or wear the colors of the LGBTQ community, come out with flags and balloons to make their presence felt among the mainstream community so that people would become aware of their challenges and aware that they have got certain rights that they are fighting for. Between 2000 and 2005, specific strides are made by the movement as they seek to repeal Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code, which criminalizes homosexuality. I'll give you a few moments to read what is on the slide. This slide outlines the major steps taken by the community to unabashedly make their presence felt in society. For example, queer film festivals screen films that would struggle to find mainstream audience. They are often activist spaces for awareness building around LGBTQ rights. Queer groups are being formed on college campuses and people are willing to elect a transgender to represent them in a state assembly. There is a recommendation by the Law Commission to repeal Section 377. Here are two major points which outline how legal steps are being taken to challenge the constitutionality of Section 377 and call for the legalization of homosexuality. In 2001, the NAS Foundation files a public interest litigation in the Delhi High Court challenging the constitutionality of Section 377 and calling for the legalization of homosexuality. Again, I'll give you a few seconds to read what's on the slide. Safe spaces for homosexuals are being formed. However, at times, the general public, which is so used to consuming unreal romantic soap stories, is offended by the truth of homosexuality, which could be closer to home than they would like to admit. And the last point outlines that there is bad news for the community because the Delhi High Court dismisses the public interest litigation filed by the NAS Foundation. The eighth section deals with major events that took place between 2006 and 2010. In a landmark judgment in July 2009, in the case that was going on between NAS Foundation versus Government of Delhi, the Delhi High Court bench decided to strike down Section 377, saying that it violated the fundamental rights to life, liberty, and equality as enshrined in the Indian Constitution. The Delhi High Court held that consensual homosexual sex between adults is not a crime and is a violation of fundamental rights protected by the Indian Constitution. However, critics challenged the High Court's decision in the Supreme Court. So even though the High Court struck it down, this was taken up in the Supreme Court again. During this period, justice takes a step backward. On December 11, 2013, the Supreme Court overturned the Delhi High Court judgment and reinstated Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code. The Supreme Court said that it was up to the Parliament to legislate on this issue. After the Delhi Court's ruling was overturned in 2013, homosexual intercourse was recriminalized. The LGBTQ plus community suffered a significant blow. Their fight for equality and justice must still go on. The Supreme Court in 2014 ruled that transgenders had the right to determine their gender, that is, if they chose to be man, woman, or third gender, regardless of surgery, hormones, or attire. The Supreme Court ordered the government to provide transgender people with quotas in jobs and education in line with other minorities as well as key amenities. Like we saw in the slide, this is the story of Dr. Banabai Bandopya, who was born as Somanath in a traditional middle-class Bengali family in Kolkata. Her father was a factory worker while her mother was a homemaker. She went to school on the outskirts of Kolkata before heading off to a prominent city college to study Bengali. Despite the constant ridicule, she continued to excel in studies and became the first transgender to complete a PhD in West Bengal. When Manabai applied for the post of a lecturer, she was forced to apply as a male lecturer. Manabai decided to undergo hormone replacement and a sex change operation in 2003, which cost her a whopping rupees 5 lakhs at that time, after being convinced that she was a woman born in a man's body. After the long, continuous process, in which she also had to undergo multiple sessions of counseling, Manabai finally felt free. She changed her gender and her name in 2006. There were taunts at work about her sex change. She is now the principal of a government-sponsored women's college in the Nadia district of West Bengal and has adopted a favorite student as her son. Manabai is now the vice chairperson of West Bengal Transgender Development Board. Her biography has been translated into several Indian languages. She is also the editor of a transgender magazine titled Abna or Subhuman. She has written 2 books, one that documents the Hijra community in India and the other is a book about third gender in our society and literature. The LGBTQ plus community is overjoyed by the ruling of the Supreme Court on 6 September 2018. The fight for justice continues, and in 2016, Navtej Singh Johar, an award-winning Bharatanatyam dancer, along with 4 other high-profile Indians, filed a writ petition in the Supreme Court challenging Section 377. On September 6, 2018, so what was filed in 2016 came to its fulfillment in 2018. On September 6, 2018, the petitions filed by Navtej Singh Johar and others against Section 377, the Supreme Court of India passed a historic verdict. This was greeted by expressions of joy by the LGBTQ plus community. As you can see over here, relief and joy mark the victory celebrations. The fight for justice is not entirely over. This final section details the civil rights that the LGBTQ community wants to claim for itself. So these are the major 7 claims made by the LGBT community and is a summary of what they are still fighting for. I will just take a few seconds to explain some of the major issues. Same-sex couples, in the absence of marriage rights, do not get adoption rights or spousal benefits such as medical and life insurances. So if a person takes a life insurance, he can also cover his or her spouse under that. This is not available to same-sex couples. So we need strong companionship law making same-sex unions a legal contract. There is also a need for gender-neutral sexual harassment law, the 4th point that I will explain, that would extend protection to queer persons. Currently, India's sexual harassment and rape laws only provide recourse to cisgender, identifying as their sex assigned at birth, cisgender women, and leave out adult men, transgender, and intersex persons vulnerable to such crimes. So right now, the sexual harassment law is only in favor of women and have left out a whole lot of others. Queer persons, also the 5th and the 6th point, often face challenges when trying to claim the family property as theirs. The country's inheritance laws do not accommodate persons outside the gender binary. So the law only recognizes male and female. They have recognized third gender, but it has not been appropriated into their inheritance laws. LGBTQ plus couples also miss out on financial benefits. A married spouse can make gifts of property or other assets to their partners without incurring tax liability. But a couple from the LGBTQ plus community cannot do the same in excess of rupees 50,000 as it will attract tax. So I can make a gift of any number of lakhs or crores to my spouse and him to me, but if it was the same sex couple, they would not be able to do the same, but would have to pay tax. So these are the issues in front of the Supreme Court that would they would like to be addressed. There are also laws based on binary gender which affects transgender. Say, for example, in the armed forces, they do recruit women into some branches, but they have not made provisions for the recruitment of transgender people. With this, I come to the end of my presentation. It is my intention that this would be an eye-opener for my audience. Until I undertook my own search for the truth, I was unaware of many concepts as well as the distinctive struggles and challenges that are being faced by the LGBT community even today. Let us support them in their fight for equality and justice. Jai Hind.
Greetings to all the participants on virtual platform. I want to give you two instructions for you. During the interaction with the resource person, feedback form link will be uploaded on the chat box. Fill in the form to receive your e-certificate later on. You cannot ask questions verbally, so write your questions in the chat box. Write your questions more precisely so that the resource person can answer them very effectively. Dear participants, the resource person has covered various concepts related to the topic. I am very sure the various concepts spoke on the topic are new for many of us. I would like to list out a few of them: gender identity, homosexuality, transgender, biological sex, sexual orientation, asexual, LGBT community, their movement, their fight for equality, sculptures on temple walls, and many other concepts related to the topic. Dear participants, you may need some more clarifications in this regard, so you can ask your questions by writing in the chat box. Mercy Divya Pinto has asked a question. Though we are educated a lot, we speak a lot about gender equality, ma'am, then why there is a discrimination against transgender in educational setup, employment, or many opportunities?
Even though our society is trying to move towards equality and justice, there is still a lot of blocked mindsets with regard to job opportunities, especially, and even in the educational setup. As you may have seen in the recent past, Black Lives Matter, the movement that is going on in America, they also are a democratic country, but in their very system, in their very mindset, in their thinking, they do not regard black and white as equal. They may have the laws in writing, it may be framed in their constitution, but it has not yet become a practice. And that is the challenge that we are also facing with regard to the LGBTQ plus community, that we may have till 2018, they were regarded as criminals. People who would be indulging in a homosexual practice could be put behind bars. It's only recently that it has been decriminalized. But in the last slides, as you have seen, there is still so much of fights. There's still so much to claim as their rights. So I will admit that there is prejudice, and that prejudice can be removed only when people like you and me, and especially as I address the students, the next generation who are going to hold jobs and portfolios, who are going to be in decision-making positions, that they will afford equal opportunities for the transgender and the LGBTQ community.
I think the resource person has given a satisfactory answer to Divya's question. Satya has a question. As future teachers, how do we include this issue in our teaching sessions so that children are sensitized? Parents may not like it.
Yes. The second part is very true because right now in India, there's a lot of stigma attached. When a lady is pregnant and she delivers the baby, the first question is it a boy or is it a girl? But when it is unsure, like I showed you in the slide, some part of it may be male, some part of it may be female. We only look at the genitalia and we describe. And even if that is ambiguous, then they're not able to come up. So parents may not like it is definitely a condition that exists. And like I said, it is up to us and the next set of parents to become more open-minded. With regard to your first question as to how do we as teachers include this in our teaching sessions, there is not only a lot of scope among biology teachers. You don't have to think that you need to be a biology teacher to address this issue when you do the chapter on sexual reproduction. It starts with what kind of an attitude you have towards your class. Whether whatever class the children may be, the smaller standards, or if you're teaching high school, or whether if you're teaching the PUC level. First of all, how sensitive are you? Usually these type of children get bullied, get called names. Their fellow classmates are not sure how to classify them. And you can, if you come to know of this, you can take advantage of these opportunities to not only just call the child aside and provide some kind of individual support and counseling, but also use that as an opportunity to address the class. You might be a history teacher, but if you see this kind of activity going on, you can use this as an opportunity to discuss these issues. Now, again, you have to take into account the level of the child. Uh, you cannot explain in very technical or scientific terms to a second year or second standard or third standard. As the level increases, you can include more information. And I'm sure that schools have got sex education in their curriculum, which is taught as an extra. And that is where teachers like you who are teaching in such schools should tell the management, persuade the management to include this topic when they take up sex education with the children.
I hope Satya has got the answer for a question. We have another question from Shatu Gupta. Do you think even after so much of awareness about the third gender, will Indians really change their
perspective towards them? Yeah, it is awareness which is the key. It is speaking about this, like I said in the first part when I opened up, we as academicians also talk about it in hushed tones. We have to be more open in speaking about the third gender. When we look at the hijras who come to us on the roadside, very often begging or asking for money, what is our attitude? Can you check your own attitude first when you look at them? Is there a kind of a disdain? Is there a kind of a repulsion? What is the self-talk that is going on in your mind? I hope after today's talk and also after your own reading, that the next time you look at a hijra on the road, you will have empathy. You will be able to say in your mind, I understand your struggles. I think life must be quite difficult for you. You're not able to get a job in a multinational company or in an organization so easily. That's why maybe you are here on the road. So it starts with ourselves first. How much awareness do we have in ourselves? And how do we bring this awareness to others in the society around us? Do we talk about these issues in our family? Do we talk about these issues with our spouse, with our children? So that's where it starts. In the small circle of influence that you have, if you can bring about this awareness, if you can give this respect to the third gender, if you can understand their struggles, if you can volunteer at least once to go and visit an organization who works among them, if you can take your children to see what is going on there, then only will it be possible for society as a whole to change their attitude towards them. I can see the next question by Krishna. How can teachers include gender identity and sexuality subjects in sex education initiatives conducted in primary schools these days? In primaries, I'm honestly speaking, I am not aware that sex education has already started in primary school. Is that a fact? Is what is happening? I thought it would be only when they go to little older classes. But like I said previously, when you start feeding the infant, you don't give it rice and curry and fish fry in the first meal that it has. You start off with something that is easily digestible, that the baby can take, mashed food, rice which is doubly cooked. So you only have to give what the child at that age can understand. Otherwise, it will cause indigestion and diarrhea. So you have to use your discretion in telling about these subjects.
Mercy Divya has one more question once again. Not a question, she has remarks. Does anyone have any other question?
Yeah, what is the correct pronoun to use when speaking to someone whose gender expression may be extremely ambiguous? I would think that the most respectful way to address this issue would be to ask them directly. Some like to be used with the pronoun she or her, and some him or he or him. And some like to be called they or them. Actually, when you put in this they or them, we people who are so used to the English language, we feel the grammar is not correct. Instead of saying he is looking at me, I'll have to say they are looking at me. They is looking at me. Them is looking at me, which does not sound correct at all. But that is the pronoun, because they and them are very neutral. It does not denote either male or female. So if that person is in your circle of friendship, it would be most respectful to ask them how they would like to be addressed and address them accordingly, or they and them is the neutral pronoun.
Sandhya has one question. How does one express their friends and family their sexual orientation? They may face expulsion.
Yes, this is the fact of the matter, that society expels you, your friends may leave you if you are not true to yourself. I would say that first of all, you have to be true to yourself. That is your first. That is your first calling to your own self. And I have outlined many stories for you, and you have also seen the video clips on people who have been able to get over this. I admit that you need a lot of courage and a lot of bravery to face this. But it is worth to make that effort rather than living with a lie. So many marriages, like I showed you in the case of Manabai also, they think, when the sexual orientation is other than to the opposite gender, they think that marriage is a cure and they force them to get married. And actually, that's a disaster. And it wrecks the lives of more than one person. So I would say that you should be true to yourself and not agree to. So, but when do you have to come out to your friends and family? How do you go about it? Are specific questions that are for each individual would be different. I would strongly advocate that before you do this, that you find a counselor for yourself and that you express to your counselor your feelings, your ideas, your difficulties. And with the help of counseling, counseling is not for mad people. Counseling is not for those who have psychological problems. Counseling is for everybody. So, because all of us face challenges in life, all of us face problems, and I would encourage you to first get into a counseling relationship with a counselor and take the support of counseling as you go forward in this direction.
Yes, madam has given a right answer for that question. We have a question from the principal of our college. What about same-sex marriages and property rights? Is there going to be a change in the near future?
Yeah, these are issues, ongoing issues, like you saw, the struggle for repealing Section 377 started in 2001 and it came to its fruition only in 2018. It's only in 2018 that homosexuality was decriminalized. And these issues are in the court of law with regard to same-sex marriages, with regard to property rights. And these, as you know, our law system takes its own time. So we are hopeful that these changes will take place and that India will move forward in this direction.
We have a question from Sakshi Sharma. I have witnessed this gender discrimination in my very close relation. Yes, we need to change our mindset.
Yes, and that happens. That happens when people like you, Sakshi, start talking to your own relative to whom this happened. Start talking to their parents. Start being an ally, a person who is supportive. Because this community, I can assure you, goes through a lot of discrimination and a lot of hardship. So show your support to them. I would encourage every one of you to become an ally, to be supportive to this group, to reach out to them, to try and find out who they are in your circle and talk about these things more openly. And only then will we bring about change in mindset.
We have a question from Delna Lobo. Same-sex couples, if they adopt children, will they be able to do justice to their children?
Yeah. What exactly is justice while bringing up children? If you look at bringing up children, the main ingredients for them to flourish is to have a very loving and a supportive environment. This can be provided by heterosexual couples and homosexual couples. It is society which has put these ideas in our brain that the man must go out to work and the woman must work at home. That the man cannot do cooking and cleaning. And that there are certain jobs that are reserved for men, like, say, being a firefighter or an ambulance driver or a pilot. Immediately we make an association with men and women. So this gender bias is what society imposes on us. And we think that, okay, for a family, for a child to grow up, they need a male figure and a female figure to play a role in order to bring them up as good citizens of the country with good values. What about homes where there is a lot of physical violence by the man or emotional abuse by the woman? Does that not affect children? Also, you are going by the presumption that it is a heterosexual couple only who will do justice. Why not open your mind to think about why not a homosexual couple? What is wrong in that? What is different in that? What do you mean by the term justice? So these are questions, beautiful topics for debate, beautiful topics for discussion, which I would encourage you to have among yourselves, as teachers, as colleagues, and then spill it over to your family, to your friends, and even in your workplace.
Participants, you can ask any other queries. Manjula Sumant has a question. What is the difference between transgender and the third gender?
Yeah, the third gender is usually refers to the transgender people. So usually we have the binary gender, which means that society recognizes only male and female. But there may be other people who are born as a woman, but they want to transition on to being male. That is, they may have a body of a woman or they may have a body of a man, like we saw in the case of Manabe, the person who became the principal. She was born as Somnath, but she was not at all comfortable in that identity or in that body. So she transferred over to, that's why you get the word trans. So they move over to the other gender. At that time, when they are feeling their body is one thing, but they are feeling a different thing, they are referred to as transgender. You also have intersex people who are born both, who are androgynous, that is, they have a mixture of both male and female, but generally third gender refers to transgender.
Participants, you can ask two more questions. So we have one question from Vani M. What is the role of a teacher in society in wiping out the stigma attached to the LGBT?
Yeah, I'm very happy that you have come up with this question. Most of you all are already teachers or are training to be teachers in society. And you all have a great impact and influence on young minds who come under your care. I remember even when my children were in school, and it is a general phenomena that if they like the teacher, they will do well in that subject. And if they don't like the teacher, they will not do well in the subject. This is very true from the small class right up. So why I'm telling you that is, You teachers must realize that you have a great impact on the students and the lives that you handle that come in contact with you. And you have a role to play in wiping out the stigma that is attached to the LGBTQ community. I'm sure that even school children, for example, I can just think of an example on the spot. All of us are familiar with the Hijra community, and they are called by different names. Community who come begging at the roads. This is a general topic. Even a 6th, 7th standard boy or girl would be aware of the third gender there. So you can initiate discussions on this community. How did they become like that? What exactly has happened? How do they earn their living? What is it that we must do to support them? So, in as natural a way as possible, it is good for you teachers who will be the element in society to wipe out the stigma, to use this information, to use this knowledge in helping to wipe out the stigma as attached to the LGBTQ group.
There is one more question from Sharmila Pinto. Is it possible to change the sexual behavior of a gay or a lesbian to normal?
The wordings of that question make me smile. What exactly is normal? We people in our Indian society are influenced, have been told that only heterosexual sex is normal and that being gay or lesbian is abnormal. So your very premise itself you need to take a second look at. I can see that you regard gay or lesbian as abnormal, but they are as normal as a heterosexual couple, a person who is attracted to the opposite gender. So, this entire talk that I've had is to bring out these issues, is to bring out these concepts, is to have talks, is to have discussions as to what is normal and what is abnormal. Why am I influenced in my mindset to think like this? And like I showed you in some of my slides, uh, many parents, when they see that their little boy that their young teenage adult growing boy is not attracted to girls, but is attracted to other boys, they bring them to a psychiatrist. They take them to a institution for mental health. They think that there is some cure for them. And sometimes in the past, very often this cure for changing sexual orientation included giving them electric shocks, numbing their brain, or giving them some drugs. So, and scientifically, this has absolutely no effect on their sexual orientation. The better thing to do is to examine the word sexual orientation. There are some who are oriented to the opposite gender, there are some who are oriented to the same gender, and there are some who have sexual attraction to both the genders. So, what is it that is making you to say that one is normal and the other is abnormal? So, I would ask you to reflect on your own self, your own values, your own judgments, and read up more on this topic and uh, come to a point where you can accept this as normal.
Okay. We have the last question, madam. That is by Krishna. In spite of criticism, how can people maintain their sense of agency and confidence while taking a completely different path?
This is not at all easy to do. When you travel on a road that is not used by others, when the entire general population is going down the same pathway, it is very easy to follow the crowd. It is much more difficult, I agree with you, when you are being criticized, when your confidence is being shaken, that you opt and choose to take a different path. That is not easy. You need to fortify yourself. You need to make yourself strong, and for different people, it means different things. You do definitely need some close friend or family member on whom you can lean on. And if you can't find that at this moment, I would advise you again to get into counseling and to find a counselor who supports you. And with the help and strength that you get from your own conviction, first of all, that you should be convicted that this is your path and that you are not doing something that is wrong or abnormal, and that you should be able to face a lot of reading on your part, a lot of reflection on your part, and getting the support of others who would join you on this path, I think would help uh, to face the situation.
Thank you, madam. With this, we come to the end of the interaction. I request all the participants to fill in the Google Forms feedback form so that you will receive the e-certificate soon. Over to Mrs. Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Jerome. Thanking is the highest form of act. It energizes and empowers. As we come to the end of the webinar, I request Mrs. Sandhya, faculty, to deliver the vote of thanks. Good afternoon to all. I deem it a great privilege to propose the words of gratitude. I extend sincere thanks to Reverend Father Dr. Pravin Matis S.J., Director, for awakening interest and desires in us to conduct this national webinar on the history of LGBT in India. I thank him in his absence. With immense pleasure, I thank Dr. Lily David, speaker of the webinar, for her vital time with us and sharing her knowledge and wisdom on the center ideas on gender and sexuality, history of LGBTQ in India. Thank you, ma'am. I express sentiments of gratitude to Dr. Farita Vegas, our principal, for our encouragement and able guidance in organizing this webinar. Thank you, ma'am. Profuse thanks to all the esteemed participants for turning up our invitation and paying your valuable attention throughout the session. Thank you all. Heartfelt thanks to the organizer of this webinar, Mr. Jerome D'Souza, for his meticulous plan and publicity to register people across the country.